In this video, we're going to learn how we can allow our users to make payments using PayPal. So what we're doing here is you can see just in front of you this form, which is going to allow us to enter a product, a price, and then click pay. And this doesn't need to be how you set up your application. This is just an example form that's going to pass through these details and go ahead and then take the user off to PayPal, allow them to pay with either their PayPal balance or go ahead and use a stored card that they have. Then they're going to come back and their payment is going to complete and we'll give them a message. So before we start doing this, we need to just take a look at a couple of things that we need in order to do this. Now, the first thing is that you need a PayPal account. And once you do have a PayPal account, or if you already do have a PayPal account, you need to come over to developer.paypal.com, sign in with your PayPal account, and head over to your dashboard. And this is where we can create an app which will give us our API keys in order to actually process a payment. The second thing you're going to need is Composer, which is a dependency manager for PHP. And what this will allow us to do is pull down PayPal's PHP SDK. This is just a library essentially that allows us to connect to PayPal in a really easy to understand way, very clean code in some respects, and just go ahead and sort everything out for us. We don't need to make calls to PayPal on our own. So it's just a helper really. So once you have a PayPal account, or you've signed into developer.paypal.com if you already do have an account, and you have Composer downloaded, we can go ahead and start with this. And obviously this whole process can be integrated into anything within your application. You can define multiple products, you can set tax rates, you can set shipping, and you can set your currency as well. So you can go and take this and just use it however you need to. So let's get started from pretty much from scratch and start to build in this functionality. So we'll first take a quick look at this form that we're using to send data through to our checkout page. We can see here we've got a basic page, basic markup layout. We have a style sheet linked in, which is obviously what makes this page look like this. And then we have this form. So this goes through to checkout.php, which we'll eventually be creating. We're sending this through with a post method, so we can pick this up using PHP's post superglobal. And we have two inputs here, one called product and one called price. And then we have a submit button to allow the user to make a payment. So the next step is going to be downloading the PayPal PHP SDK that we saw earlier. So once you have Composer installed, we can go ahead and pull this down into our application and start to use it straight away. And if you go ahead and search for Packagist under PayPal's REST API, we can go ahead and pull in a version. So in this case, I'm pulling in version 1.3.2. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to head over to my application and I'm going to create a composer.json file, which will allow us to pull this down. And in here, we can define what we want to require, or what we need to require into our application as a dependency. So let's just copy this and paste that into there. Perfect. And we can obviously change the version. We could do 1.3.star if we wanted, but we'll just leave it at this for now. So once we've done that, we need to head over to our terminal to actually install this. So if we just pull this up, I'm currently in the PayPal directory. So we have our index file, our CSS directory, and our composer.json file, and we've just run composer install. That's going to download that dependency, and then we can just include it straight into our project. So there we go, it's already done. Mine loaded from cache, but yours might take a little bit longer if you've not downloaded this before, and it'll have to download from Packagist. But now we have this vendor folder with PayPal here and our autoloader, which we can include into our project. So what we want to do now is set up our application to actually be able to use this. But before that, we're going to create a PayPal application. So once you are signed in, you're over in your dashboard, you want to hit create app just up here. That's going to go ahead and allow you to create an app. And we can give our app a name. So in this case, I'm just going to call it pay for something, but you can call that whatever you want. So we hit create app. And once that is done, we now see a little bit of information about this app. So it has a unique client ID and secret. So we use these to be able to actually connect to PayPal to process our payments. And it's important to note that we have a sandbox and a live version. So doing this within the sandbox will not matter at all. It won't take any money from you or anyone else. It's only when you switch over to live that you will actually be able to take payments from real people. So we're going to stick with our sandbox for now. We've got our client ID and secret. So inside of our application, let's go ahead and pull in the SDK and set everything up. So I'm going to create a app directory within my root PayPal account directory. And inside of here, we're going to create a new file and we're going to call this start.php. So although this isn't structured like a real application, we're going to pretend this is some kind of container maybe that we can actually just create a new PayPal instance from. So inside of here then, we obviously need to require in vendor autoload.php. That's going to go ahead and pull in the SDK ready to use. And I'm going to create just a variable here called PayPal. And everything under the PayPal SDK is namespaced. So in this case, we're going to be pulling in and instantiating an API context class, which is namespaced under PayPal REST. And then we have an OAuth token credential class, which is namespaced under PayPal Auth. If you've not worked with namespaces before, don't worry too much. I'm sure you'll understand by the end of this video because everything is namespaced. We can import namespaces at the top, but in here we're just going to create inline. So we're going to say new PayPal REST API context. And inside of here, we need to pass in our credentials. So to do this, we pass in a new instance of PayPal Auth OAuth token credential. And we have two arguments here. The first is the client ID, the second is the secret. So we already have these here. We can just copy these and paste them in. And just by doing this, this is going to allow us to just do anything really, make card payments, make any other payments, set up anything within the PayPal API. So let's copy over our secret as well. I've just put these on different lines just so it's a little bit neater. And we should be good to go. The last thing I'm going to do inside of start.php is define the overall site URL. And the reason I'm doing this is because when we actually set everything up, we need to tell PayPal where to redirect the user after they've made a successful payment or they've cancelled or something's gone wrong. So I'm just going to do this as a global variable, but obviously this would be in some kind of configuration within your application. And the URL is just going to be this one here. So let's just paste this in and I'll get rid of the trailing /. So we're now done in start.php. We can close this off and we'll now go ahead and create this checkout.php file. So we can actually start to set everything up and then send the user off to PayPal to make a payment. So let's create a new file in here and we'll call this checkout.php. And inside of here then, what we need to do first of all is pull in app start because that's where we're defining our PayPal connection. And just for the sake of this video, remember we have this product and price. I'm going to check if these are actually set before I do anything. Obviously you would have some kind of validation here, but in this case, I'm just going to, for this example, check if they're not set. So we're checking post product and we're checking post price. If they're not set, we'll just kill the page. So now we want to pull in our product price. We want to define the shipping rate. We don't have to do this, but I'm going to in this example. And then we want to calculate our total amount. So we're going to say product. That's going to be post product. We have our price, which is exactly the same, but with pricing. We have our shipping rate. I'm going to set this to 2 in whatever currency we define. You could set your currency up here as well, or set your currency in some kind of configuration. And now I want to work out the total, which is just the price plus the shipping. And you could obviously go ahead and cast this to a float if you wanted to. It's entirely up to you how you structure this and do everything. So the next step then is to define the payment method. How is the user paying? Well, they're paying with their PayPal account, so this is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to create a variable called payer, and this is a new instance of payer, which is part of the PayPal REST SDK. And then we're going to say payer, set payment method, and we're just going to choose PayPal. Simple as that. So let's go ahead and just check out what we get here. This will result in an error, just to pre-warn you, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. So we hit pay, and we get class payer not found. So remember I said everything's namespaced. Everything that we're going to be using here in terms of these classes are namespaced under PayPal API. So at the top, we can import these namespaces. So we can say use PayPal API payer. And then when we go and refresh again, send that data through again, we see nothing. So we've got no errors and we're good to carry on with the rest of this. So now we're getting to defining the items that we want to be in the user's basket when they go over to PayPal. And this will list them to them, calculate it all over, and then it will give them the total they need to pay. So we're going to define the first item here. If you want to define multiple items, you can. So for example, if you're building some kind of shopping cart, you can do that. And this is a new item. Let's just import this at the top. So it's API item. And with this item, we're going to go ahead and set the name of this item. And we already have the name of the item. It's the product that the user typed in. So we're going to say product. And we're also going to set the currency. You could have the user define this and you could check it against the currencies that you support. We're going to set the quantity. In this case, it's just going to be 1. And we're going to set the price. In this case, it's just going to be price. So all this is a list of methods or a chain of methods from this item here. And you would do this for every item that you wanted to add to your basket or to the user's PayPal list of things they need to pay for. So now we create a new item list object. So we say item list. That's a new item list. And again, we need to import this at the top. So it's just PayPal API item list. And now with item list, we're going to set the items. So the items is an array of items you've provided. So I'm going to create an array in here and I'm just going to pass 1 in. If you had multiple items, you could go ahead and do this and that would just calculate everything up for you within PayPal. So let's get rid of these 2. So now what we want to do is set some details about this payment. So we create a new details object. We import it at the top. And with this, what we want to do is set the shipping and the subtotal. You can also set tax here as well. So we're going to say set shipping. And we have a shipping rate that we find in a variable just here. Again, could come from your config. And another method, we're chaining on methods again, setting the subtotal. And that's the total that we calculated just here. So that is the price plus the shipping. So now that we've done that, let's just give this a refresh just to make sure we didn't misspell anything. Perfect, so it looks good. Now we want to create a new amount object, set the currency, the total, and set the details. So we're going to say amount, new amount. And as you probably guessed, we need to import this at the top. And from the amount, we want to go ahead and set the currency. Again, this is going to be GBP, matches our items currency. We want to set the overall total. So remember this is subtotal, but in our case, the total and the subtotal are the same. And we want to set the details of this payment. And we already have the details in here, so all we do is we just pass in the details object. So now we're getting to the transaction, which is going to allow us to set the transaction amount, which is the amount we created here. So we're just passing that into it. We're going to set the item list, which we have here. And we're going to set the description and the invoice number as well. That can be anything you want. So let's go ahead and say transaction is a new transaction. Just capitalize that T. And again, we need to import this at the top. So transaction. And with the transaction then, we want to set the amount. This isn't like the actual value amount. which is this amount here. So amount, so we're passing that object in. We also want to set the item list. So the item list is here. So we just pass in item list. And then we want to set the description. This is just a string of anything you want it to be. So I'm going to say pay for something, which is our imaginary app payment. And then we want to set our invoice number. This can be anything. You can generate whatever you want. In this case, just as an example, we'll put a unique ID generated in there. That's it. So now we want to set our redirect URLs. This is where the user is going to be returned on success or on failure. So depending on what happens on PayPal's side. So we're going to set redirect URLs to a new redirect URLs object. Again, we need to import these up here like that. And what we do here then is we say redirect URLs set return URL. That's going to be our return URL. And we set our cancel URL. So our return URL, we're going to utilize the global site URL that we created up here. So remember, that's tutorials.dev port 8000 PayPal. This will just be whatever domain you're working on. And we are going to put this into here. And we're going to concatenate on /pay.php, which we haven't created yet. We're going to be creating in a moment. And we're going to define here success true. So that's it. And we'll do pretty much the same thing for this. But if the user cancels it, we want success to be false. And we can use this within PHP to check if it was successful or not successful. And then we could give errors, redirect, log something, whatever we need to do. So now we're going to create and this is the final object that we're going to instantiate, which is the payment object. So we're going to say payment, new payment. And within this, we want to set the intent, which is just going to be a sale. We're just selling something straight off. We're not delaying anything. We want to set the payer, the redirect URLs, and the transactions we created. So there's nothing really new here to do. We're just passing these objects into this payment. So we're going to say payment set intent. This is a sale. We are going to set the payer, which we've created here. So we just pass that in, payer. We're going to set the redirect URLs, which we've created here. So we just pass them in. And we're going to set the transactions, which we created here. This is an array of any additional transactions. So we just have one in this case. So again, let's just refresh, just make sure we didn't do anything wrong. So yeah, we forgot to import this final class here. So we're just going to say payment. When we refresh, there we go. So we're not actually sending anything to PayPal yet, and we're not actually doing anything in terms of redirecting the user. But what we need to do is from this payment object, use the create method, passing in our PayPal connection. What that's going to do is it's going to send these details to PayPal and verify that everything's okay. Then what it's going to do is it's going to give us back a load of data, which we can then do things like get the approval link, which is essentially just the link that we want to send the user to approve the payment. So we're going to wrap this in a TryCatch block because we can actually catch exceptions here. It's not really important at this point. It's more important at the point that the user returns. So for example, if something went wrong, we could return the user, catch the error, and then go ahead and output it to them. So this will typically throw an exception. We can just go ahead and kill this and output E. And this is great for debugging or logging if anything goes wrong. So you can just see the result of that. So the line of code that we're trying for is using payment that remember we created here. And we're using the create method. This will actually create a payment in terms of sending all the details that you've already defined over to PayPal. It will give us the approval link and we can go ahead and redirect the user to finish their payment. This won't actually charge the user at this point. So we're passing in PayPal, which is obviously this in here. And what we can then do is go ahead and grab the approval URL. So we're going to set that to payment get approval link. So just for the sake of it at the moment, let's just echo this out just to see what we get. And we'll head back over to this page here. We'll type in a product, we'll type in a price, hit pay. And it looks like we did in fact get an error. So what we're going to have to do is go back and check everything here. So we can see we got an HTTP response code of 400. When accessing sandbox.paypal.com, and this would pass in all of the data that we've already sent, and it's gone ahead and sent it over to the API. So there was obviously a problem somewhere. So let's go back and just have a look at what might have gone wrong. So if we just head over to our text editor, let's just take a look here. So it probably has something to do with the price here that we've set. These are coming through properly. And if we just check our item price, and okay. So our subtotal is obviously minus our shipping and tax. So in this case, we're setting the subtotal to total when this should be the price of the item. So let's go ahead and just give this another go. So we'll go back to our page here. Let's go ahead and type in coffee again, £10, hit pay, and this should go ahead and give us that URL we wanted, and there it is. So we obviously don't want to display to the user this URL, we want to actually redirect them. So at the bottom here, instead of echoing this out, we'll go ahead here and just redirect the user. So we'll say header, we'll choose the location here, we're just sending a HTTP header here, and this is just going to be approval URL. So that's pretty much it. Let's now go back again. Go ahead and type in an item and a price and hit pay. And now what will happen is we'll be forwarded to PayPal to see them details. So as you can see, basically being sent over, we've got the price of the item here and the quantity, which remember we set. And you can see that we've got postage and packaging here set to £2 as well. And this just gives us the overall price. So how do we go about testing this? I'm not going to log in with my PayPal account. What we actually want to do here is go ahead and hit this accounts area just here. And once we're over here, you can see that we've got a couple of accounts just here. And we can set up other accounts. You can create another account if you want. But in this case, we've got Alex-Buyer. This is just added by default. So what we can do is we can head over to Profile and we can check this out. And this will allow us to do things like change any settings to do with the user, so payment reviews, etc., etc. And we can change the password as well. So you can go ahead and set a password using this, and then you can actually log in with this. So what we're going to do then is we're going to take this email address here, and over on this screen here, we're going to paste that in. We're going to type in the password that we set in that screen we just saw a minute ago, and I'm going to hit login. So that's going to log me in. It's going to give me a fake address just here. It's going to show me that the transaction is going to come, or the amount is going to come from my PayPal balance, and I can go ahead and click continue. So what this is going to do then is send us back to the file that we specified earlier. So remember we set the return URL to the site URL, and then this pay.php file, success equals true. And this is what's happened here, although this file can't be found. So we're just getting this error here. So we need to create pay.php then. We need to check if success was true or false, and then do something depending on that. If it is true, we can use the payment ID and we can use the payer ID to actually charge the user. Now at the moment, if you head under transactions, we won't actually see a transaction for what we've just done now because it hasn't actually charged the user. We only charge the user when they come back to us. We need to send another API call to go ahead and actually process that payment. So here are all of the transactions I've tested. This one here does say £12, but it isn't for this. You can see the time's a little bit different. So we need to actually go ahead and sort out this pay.php file now. So again, under our root directory, let's create that pay.php file. And we'll go ahead and start to write everything out we need to do in here. This is significantly less work. So we're going to require in app start.php as usual. And now what we're going to do is check if success, i.e. the success flag that we defined within our checkout. So we're going to check if that's set first of all. We're going to check that the payment ID is set, which is just here. and we're going to check that the payer ID is set. So this payment ID basically just corresponds to the ID that's being created on PayPal's side, and the payer ID identifies my account. So we'll go ahead and check this. So again, you might want to structure this in a slightly different way depending on your application, but we're going to check get success. Remember, this is stored in get superglobals now because it's in the query string of the URL. We're going to check the payment ID, and we're going to check the payer ID. Now, pay special attention to the capitalization here. In fact, that's a capital P. So we've got payment ID with a lowercase p, an ID, and then payer ID. It's essentially exactly how it appears in the URL. So if you get stuck, you can just refer to that. So if these aren't set, then we just want to kill the page there. But what you could do is just redirect the user somewhere and say something went wrong somewhere. And now what we want to do is check if, and we're going to cast get success to a Boolean. We're going to check if that's false. So that if that is false, it means something went wrong along the way. The user maybe cancelled the payment, etc. So we can just kill the page. But in reality, in here, what you'd want to do is redirect them off somewhere and give them a message, or you might want to log this somewhere. Really just depends on what you want to do. So this is less important. This would just be part of your control of how the application flows. This would be more like an actual problem. They've cancelled the checkout. So now we want to locally store the payment ID and payer ID. So let's go ahead and create payment ID variable and set that to payment ID. Remember, uppercase I, lowercase d, and then payer ID as well, which again, remember, comes from our get superglobal. It's payer with a capital P, ID, capital I and D. And now what we want to do is go ahead and grab the payment. So we grab the payment using the payment ID. So let's create a variable here called payment. And this is payment, so it's a class. We have a static method, get, and in here we pass two arguments. The first is the payment ID. The second is our PayPal setup for our SDK. So what we defined in start.php, so wherever you're storing that. But again, this is namespaced. Payment is namespaced. So we can go ahead and use PayPal API payment. So that's grabbed the payment. Now we want to execute the payment. So we're going to create a variable called execute or execution, whatever we want to do. And we're going to say new payment execution. And we don't need to do anything directly within the constructor of this, but what we need to do is set the payer ID, so who's paying for this. So we say execute set payer ID, and then we pass in the payer ID that we've stored just here. So now that we've done that, we're going to create another TryCatch block, and this is significantly more relevant to actually catch any errors here because we can grab the data and then grab a particular message if something did go wrong. So we'll test that out in just a moment, but let's create our TryCatch block here. Let's grab any exceptions that were thrown. And the line that we want to try is setting a result here to payment execute. Remember, payment here is this original class we used when we used our static get method. We want to pass in the execute object here. And again, we want to pass in our connection to the API. So at this point, let's just do a die on E, and we'll test this out and see how we can dive into any messages in here in just a moment. But otherwise, we're going to say echo payment made. Thanks. Now, ideally, what you'd want to do is at this point, you'd want to redirect the user because otherwise they're going to be left with this in the URL, and you don't really want that. So what you want to do is redirect them off somewhere. Do what you've got to do, upgrade their membership if you're charging for membership, store some kind of transaction, store the fact that they've paid so you can ship items to them, whatever you're doing here. So this would ideally be a redirect. So we can test this all over again. So let's go ahead and just go back to the previous page. And that is just here. And let's type this in again. And type in a price and hit pay. We forwarded through to PayPal as we've already seen. And again, we can go ahead and log in with this test account that we have as part of our app. hit login. We can go ahead and hit continue. Now we're going to be sent back, and all of that we've just written is actually going to process the payment, and then we should see the success message. Okay, of course. So again, this is namespace, so really important to know. So we've got payment execution just here. So we'll just say payment execution. And we can just refresh this page because the payment ID and the payer ID will still be valid. So if you just do a refresh on this page, there we go. So payment made, thanks. So what we can now do is head over to our transactions, and you'll see another £12 be placed into that transaction list. And there we go. So we've got the sale here. State is completed. We've got an amount of 12 GBP. So now let's finally just wrap up by looking at what happens if we get some kind of problem here with processing the payment. If in fact we refresh this page again, we will get an error. So the reason for this is obviously the payment has already happened for this particular payment ID. So we get a 400 error back, but that's not really that useful. We wouldn't want to output that to the user at all. What we might want to do is just go ahead and say data. And what we can do is from our exception, we can use the get data method. And that's going to go ahead and get the data that we need. But what we want to do is, because it's returned in JSON, we want to JSON decode it. All that means is it's going to turn it into an object for us. So now we can do a var dump or echo or store in your database somewhere data message. In fact, if we just go ahead and do a var dump on data and just kill the page there, you'll see this. So let me just give that a refresh again. And there you can see our object. So we've got payment state invalid. This is the message that you could either output to the user or just store somewhere. Probably best not to output these messages because you never know what they're going to contain. So it's probably best to just go ahead and maybe look up the name of this, determine what kind of problem it was, and then show your own message to the user. But anyway, you can grab the message from this if you really wanted to. So you could go ahead and echo data message if you really wanted to. Refresh the page, and then you can see that error just there. So that is pretty much it. We have gone from start to finish and pulling the PayPal PHP SDK in. We've set everything up. Bear in mind our application structure isn't probably as you would create it. You wouldn't have these files floating around in your root directory. But that's pretty much how we process a PayPal payment. And it's pretty straightforward. We've done everything we need to do. And you can go ahead and incorporate your own logic into this to basically do whatever you need to do in your application once a user has made a payment.